A lot of people go into many healing professions, I think medicine, naturopathy, psychology, counselling, and part of their reason for going into them is to heal themselves. So they feel if they go in, a lot of people go into the medical world because they have physical illnesses that they want to work on. And a lot of people go into psychology feeling that if they do that, there's issues, things that they can work on within themselves. So they do go into psychology and learn nothing about healing themselves. There's no self-development in the 6 years minimum you spend studying to be a psychologist. And there's no personal growth. That's incidental if you choose that. I mean, it's not part of the uni, but say, you know, you were going to do your own reading or do your own stuff. But it's not considered, there's no acknowledgement of the necessity to have your own psychological clarity, have your own shit kind of sorted out a bit, and at least a bit more than the people you're working with, you know. It's kind of seen as like, well, if you follow these techniques and you do these kind of forms of therapy and you're really good in those areas, then it won't matter if your whole life's completely stuffed up around you, if you don't know what you're doing, if you've got no level of clarity, it just won't matter because you're still following the techniques and those people will get better. But if you haven't cleared up a lot of your own stuff, or at least if not cleared it, be clear you have it and that you're working on it, you can quite often project it out onto your clients and get them working on stuff that is not theirs, it's yours. So, you know, you can fixate on their relationship issues if you choose the direction of the therapy, or you can fixate on their self-esteem issues and maybe they've got something else going on that they want to work on. And that's your stuff. So if you haven't done the self-development, if you haven't done it's more like self-awareness training, well, you've got a lot of unclear psychologists out there because they haven't done that. And that's why some new training coming in, and the course that's going to be offered here, that encompasses counselling and self-healing is just, it's the missing piece of the pie. You know, it's like you can learn so much. You can do all the mental health training you want. You can have read every book under the sun. You can be so good at your therapy techniques, but where's your relationship? You're not seeing your client because you've got all your own thing in here in the middle between you. It's like you're seeing them through your own lenses and your own dysfunction. There's that word again, but you know, you're seeing them through that. Researchers have done a few studies on what makes up the most benefit in counselling and in transformation and change in clients. And what they've discovered is the biggest piece of the pie, which is 40%, so nearly half, is the strengths and resources that your client brings in innately in themselves into the room with them, nothing to do with you, their stuff, their good bits, their bits that have helped them get this far. 30% is your relationship. So it's how you develop rapport, how you develop relationship, how you work with that person, your level of empathy, compassion, all the things that you can bring in and the space you can hold and the safety they can feel and the trust you can build up in that. And that requires obviously both people, and it does require the psychologist therapist to be able to inspire that and allow to be trustworthy as well, like to have that ability to be loving enough and compassionate enough and authentic enough. So you really need that level of authenticity, and we're all going to have our own lenses that we're going to see through. Sometimes we're all still going to have our issues and triggers, but to be as free of that as possible, to leave as much of that outside the door as possible, so that there is a really clear space and they can see you've seen them. And they can see you. So and you know, that can take, it's not immediate, but it's just something you work towards as you go, and so the sessions can go deeper and deeper. 15% of it only is therapeutic technique, and that's where all counsellors and psychologists spend all their training time and all their training money, all their professional development, going to go learn this technique, going to do CBT training, you know, I'm off to do narrative therapy training because it's going to transform my practice and I'm going to become really good. And it's often because working with people is very nebulous. When I started, I used to wish I was an accountant or a waitress or something, because I couldn't quantify what I was doing. It's like, did I do a good job? I don't know if I did a good job. Like, I've seen these people, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know what they thought. I don't know if they got better. Oh, you know, if I was an accountant, I'd do pages of numbers, I'd charge the client. Great, there's your pages of numbers, here's my money. You know, now it's like, here's my money, but what did I give you? You know, and that's another thing that really gets in the way of therapy, is if you start trying to do a good job all the time and be really good and have them change, you start driving the session, but you also put all of yourself in the session. It's all about you. It's how well did I perform? So that's another thing. But yeah, so psychologists, counsellors work in this field where you have to have quite a level of self-assurance and acceptance and ability to let the client get worse if that's what happens. Like, it's not because you've made them, but because maybe that's what they needed to do, rather than measure your worth as a therapist in how well your clients get better and how quickly. But because that's what a lot of us do, because we have no other way of trying to figure out how well we're doing, we keep going to these trainings and doing more therapies, and it's like, hey, what about the relationship? Working on that. But again, that's what you get when you do your own self-work and your own self-healing. There's no courses on building relationships, or if there are, they're tips and tricks and techniques. You know, like, oh, don't sit across a desk or things like that. So, and the other 15% that's missing is, I can't remember, but small, so we won't worry about it. The whole point of that was the relationship. And if you see the client in that 30%, if you're able to see them, you can then help bring out that 40%, which they may not even know of. It's hidden. They don't think they have those strengths, you know. And so if you're there able to draw those out, that's how they make leaps and bounds. That's how they progress. Because it's like, wow, I didn't know I had, you know, this level of determination, or I didn't know that I was capable of such compassion, or all their other strengths they have that come out because they've been so focused on what's wrong with them. So it's changing that focus as well. Yeah, okay, so going back to creating the relationship and probably creating the space, the empathy, the trust, the compassion, the steady support, but not, you know, doing things for people, creating that relationship which helps the client and the therapist see each other clearly and have trust in each other. When you have that empathy, you're able to transmit your knowledge or your learning, not necessarily from an expert point of view, but just from your perspective of what you feel they need to hear at that time, in a different way for every client that you see, because it's all individual. So empathy allows you to, and that relationship which empathy creates, allows you to translate your message into their words so they get what you're trying to say, but not for you, like not the way you might say it to yourself. So you need to have some insight into the way they think, the way they feel, the way they're acting, the things they're scared of, for you to really be of most help in when you're trying to transmit information or a new idea or a new perspective, in the same way that if you were to, you know, if people were to go see a clairvoyant, I mean, if you imagine you're going to see a clairvoyant and they're getting they're channeling some kind of message for you, a clairvoyant would mostly say they need to be accurate and that the relationship and the empathy with whoever they're talking to doesn't matter at all. They don't need any empathy. They just go blah, 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 whatever's coming in, out. And that person then gets the message and that's fine. What you often find if you do that, as a psychologist, even if you're not channeling, is that they get a completely different take on what you just said. So they'll come back and they'll go, hey, last week you said blah, 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 and you're like, no, no, I didn't. And what they did was they took the words that you said that you may have not said in empathy with how they were, and translated them for themselves, so they did their own little twist on them, and then gave it back to you not the way it came. So with psychologists, and if we're bridging the gap between kind of a pseudoscience and a more esoteric kind of thing, but things that are becoming more popular, and people do see a lot of clairvoyants, psychics, tarot card readers, people who are giving messages, you can't just be accurate. You can't just give, for me, what I learned at uni, or for them, whatever they're channeling. You can't just go, blah, here's what they say. You have to have a level of insight into who you're talking to know how they're going to take the message and how best to give that message. So that's where the relationship is just so incredibly important. And it doesn't matter how much learning you've done. It doesn't matter how good or accurate you are as a channeler. It's like, yeah, so what? Because that person just has all their own, like I was talking about lenses before. We might have cleared ours if we're really lucky and if we really work hard and want to be good at working with people, but they haven't necessarily. So they're going to see everything that you say through their own lenses. So you have to be aware of that and know how best to make your way through the lenses so they get the clearest message they can get of what you're trying to translate from your knowledge, or if you're a psychic or clairvoyant, what you're kind of trying to get through to them. So it's not just about saying exactly as it is, it's about saying it as it is in a way they're going to get it and be able to have the most accurate interpretation once it's gone through all their little filter systems. So it's not about accuracy, it's about empathy. No worries.